Hello and welcome to the Cavell Cloud Conversations podcast. We are back today, myself and Patrick here talking about one of the biggest shifts, I guess, happening in customer experience at the moment. It's the focus of our cloud for today. AI is changing the role of the contact center quite drastically. We're moving away from this perception of AI as something that costs money to something that can generate value across the business, both in terms of data and as a way for businesses to improve their customer relationships, support their growth trajectory, understand how better to market, communicate, and generally operate more efficiently. Obviously, across EMEA, demand on customer-facing teams is increasing quite a lot. We've got a lot of organizations under pressure to do more with less, get more out of their current ecosystem, improve where things are going, which is making AI much more of an urgent investment area for everyone. And obviously, this creates a massive opportunity for the channel, for vendors, for everyone working in the space to move beyond what has been traditional selling of contact center into thinking about how we use AI and strategy and data to move business forward. Now, to explore this further, it's not just me and Patrick today. We are joined by two fantastic guests, both Ty Stevens, who's the Director of Channel Sales for the UK and EMEA at Five9, and Steve Blood, who is the Vice President of Market Intelligence and Evangelism at Five9. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today.
You're
Good to be
welcome.
with
Thanks
you.
for having us.
No, absolute pleasure to have you on. Steve, we've chatted over a number of years, and I know it's something that at Five9 you've seen a real shift in terms of the business, in terms of the amount of artificial intelligence, how that formulates part of Five9 revenue and the Five9 proposition. So I wanted to focus on EMEA, and Finbarr mentioned it in the intro, and it's quite an old sort of adage that the contact center was viewed as a cost center. How much how do you see the role of AI changing that, and how does that impact how centers and customer experience can be seen as a sort of growth and customer value from a sort of Five9 perspective?
Well, I think, yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and you're absolutely right. I mean, this is an environment that is very process centric. Or lots of opportunity to automate. We've been doing lots of automation over many years. Some of it's been successful, other bits haven't been so successful. I think at the core of this, what we've got to think about is um, what's happening every day is companies are having conversations with their customers that isn't really being captured outside of the usual, the quality element. Did the employee do the right thing? Did they say the right thing? Did they talk over the customer? And that's what we use mostly. We use call recordings for, and also, for compliance, things like that. There is a mass of intelligence in that data. And historically, it's been very difficult to surface. What we can do now using generative, of course, is, well, first of all, we get the transcription. And that's a massive step, right? ASR and NLP in order to be able to create a transcript, specifically of phone calls, but then we have all the conversations together, and then to feed those through a generative engine that then starts to surface all sorts of things we didn't know about. Again, you could do that with speech analytics. It was a very cumbersome and difficult process. Every time you looked at a new product, you had to redo your libraries and things. We do all that now automatically. And I think what's coming through there is we're getting to understand, my goodness, there's tons of stuff in here we didn't know about our customers, opportunities to create new wealth, and so on. I mean, I'm just going to pick on the IKEA case study that was all over LinkedIn. They did the usual thing, looking for analysis of conversations to understand what they could automate. What they also discovered was a new business opportunity. Customers wanted help in planning and building out their services. So that's just one example. So I think absolutely there is still a huge focus on cost. Cost first, shall we say. I think we have an objective and a responsibility to help companies understand how actually it's not just about, yes, we can save money, we can be more efficient. What we can uncover are things that you can do differently, things that can improve the customer experience, create more loyalty, and so on. So yeah, I'm all in for it. Massive focus still on efficiency and cost savings and things, but the opportunity to grow is definitely there.
So it's effectively, it's some of those unintended unintended consequences, things that people didn't quite realize. You're looking for one thing, but actually when you really analyze the data, when you do capture all of those conversations, there's a lot of things that maybe you didn't fully realize within the business that actually could have an impact in generating value and not just minimizing cost.
Right, absolutely. I'll just give you another example of one of our customers, Anglian Windows, that were using our AI Insights product. What happened there? They had no idea that one of the biggest issues for their customers was the scaffolding that was out the front of their house stayed up for too long. They just had these new windows installed. They want to show them off to their neighbours. But of course, the scaffolding is put in by a contractor, right? So it's a separate part of the process. The windows are done, they go away and everything. So they found this out. Thought, oh my goodness! Through AI Insights, they discovered this was an issue. So they did a better job of getting rid of the scaffolding and therefore improving, the customer experience, the customer engagement, and of course things like, oh my god, they're really nice windows. Who did those for you? Masses of opportunities. So it's just a small example, right? But you're absolutely right, Patrick. All these insights are in there. You just have to surface them, and ideally as quickly as possible at the same time as the conversation's taking place.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really fascinating to think. I mean, that's one example from one specific business, and other companies are sort of sitting there being like, well, they don't understand how scaffolding outside your house becomes a real pain unless you've had serious building work on an old house, which we do a lot here in the UK. Um, you know, but it kind of is these sorts of insight levels that you can extract from this data that we've never done before, because before it was anecdotal, where someone would review a percentage of the calls and try and learn from them, and now we're talking about mass level intelligence. But coming to you, Ty, because obviously get you involved in this discussion as well. Like, from the channel, how is this, affecting the channel partners, right? Because they're obviously being asked to work with new technology, they're being asked to work with AI, they're being asked to help their customers transform more. Is it just another technology sale to them, or are they getting involved hands-on alongside you to sort of deploy these things?
No, they're definitely getting involved hands-on. I think Steve mentioned an element around speed, and that is definitely happening, and it's also coming down market. So, if we roll back 2 years ago, as Steve mentioned, yeah, AI has been around, and you could do some really, really powerful elements. As Steve mentioned, you could do some pretty poor experiences as well. But some of that will be very costly to implement and timely. What we're seeing now is that that's coming down market with generative AI, as Steve mentioned. It means businesses can deploy elements quicker. It means that they can surface insights quicker. So from a channel perspective, our partners are really leaning in. They're starting to understand how the tools that we offer can really benefit their businesses, not just from a consulting perspective, but also then an upsell perspective long term. And we can get into that later, but absolutely starting to see that more businesses are coming to us saying, we want AI, but we want AI in these use cases because we can surface it quicker. Previously, it would have to be a full consulting engagement, which potentially just was a blocker to entry for quite a few of those customers.
And just in terms of Ty talking about the channel there, one of the things we've seen from a huge amount of customers is AI being implemented in a testing proof of concept phase. People want to establish a lot of it's related to consumption-based costs. There's a lot of trial and error. We talk about the art of the possible a lot in terms of what is actually possible. How do you feel we're moving from that AI pilot to real outcome phase, and how should organizations think about that move towards agentic AI, so even more outcome based, actual workflow action based across the sort of customer journey?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think I think we instinctively know ourselves that agentic AI is at the peak of inflated expectation. It is a bit of a challenge right now. So we shouldn't be overstating the opportunities. I do think let's look at where we are. In terms of the deployment of AI right now, especially generative models, there's a huge amount that is in the agent side, right? So it's not customer facing, it's agent facing, and we're seeing some great results there, right? We're seeing improvements in obviously in efficiency, better quality of wrap up that goes into it, it's so important. A quality summary helps with the downstream activities. That poor brand new service rep, very nervous. Oh my goodness, what should I put in here? And things. This is very helpful to be able to create these sorts of things. So there's lots going on there, and that is really starting to scale. I think we just looking at our at the end of last year, we posted 100 million ARR in AI attach. By the end of Q1 this year, it had grown to 125 million. It's just escalating, and because we're seeing that companies are seeing the benefit of doing that. I think that with agentic, there are opportunities, and I think it's going to follow very much the same route as we've seen with generative. It's going to start at the employee end, okay, so the agent side, and the big trust issues, I think, with looking at the front end customer service. I was in a conversational design institute session in Barcelona a few weeks ago. Lloyd's Bank are trying to basically create answers for all of their questions around investments. And they've got 160 people working on this project with 25 conversational designers. They've been going for, I sense, nearly a year, and they haven't actually launched anything yet. Massive cost associated because they want to get it right. They're a regulated organization. They have to get it right. Okay. So where are we seeing success with agentic? I'm going to pick up on, agentic QM. Okay. So this is the idea where instead of manually scoring and rating staff, you do this automatically through the technology. We launched our agentic QM product into trial, I think, the start of this year. What we're doing there, the agentic bit is that it's making decisions. It's doing all the scoring and things that you'd expect, which is, very similar to existing models. What it's then doing is saying, okay, well, we need to adjust routing, or we need to adjust skill sets of employees. So all of that is sort of, coming downstream, as it were. And, we've seen an amazing feedback. One of our trialists said they recovered 30% of supervisor time. So they could now become real coaches instead of just auditors of the employees. Another one was supervisors spent less time hunting for examples to score. And the really interesting one for me was, I was a bit worried that staff, the service reps, think, oh, I'm being scored by a robot now. How good is that? That's not going to make me feel very good. But interestingly, one customer said, because they were rating every single engagement, 100% of engagements, they actually got a 10% reduction in agent churn. Because the employees felt, this is fair. I might have had a bad day. They might have scored me on a bad day. But over the month, they're looking at absolutely everything, and they're getting a fair assessment of my performance. So I think, again, we're going to see agentic roll out first on the employee side. And then I think we'll see it move towards the customer facing. We need to do a lot more work on data. Data sources, especially to make decisions. Companies have to trust that more. So the idea of autonomy, especially if it's a big decision, we'll keep plugging away at the use cases, trying to help customers do that. But, it's work in progress for sure. We're just not there yet to autonomously handle, a large percentage at scale, those sorts of front-end inquiries. So we'll get there, but I'm excited as to where we've got to. And I think, the opportunities will continue to emerge over the next year or two.
Yeah. I mean, what stands up for me is that you've kind of put a package out there of, these quite complicated use cases, finding the value, working with your customers to build it, kind of saying, okay, now we can score everything. But a lot of customers won't realize that the decision they have to make isn't just turning on the QM, it's also deciding how their agents are going to interact with it on a daily basis. And then those decisions are directly going to impact how the agents feel about the tool. Because if you deploy the same tool in the wrong way, the agents might have a negative response to it versus a positive. And that kind of illustrates the conversations we're having at Cavell with partners who are saying, it's not just about what the technology can do. The capabilities of the technology are growing very, very rapidly. Actually, it's about these strategic conversations that we're having where you already said the art of the possible. It's about helping the customers actually understand where they need to go. So I guess, Ty, it's a question for you in terms of your conversations with partners. There's all this AI-led customer experience discussion going in. Should partners trying to sell this technology be trying to move upstream? Should they be coming business change consultants, operational transformation consultants? Is that where they have to go to bring their customers on this journey?
Two trends we're seeing at the moment. So yes, to a certain extent, I would say that we are seeing them become more trusted advisors. So wouldn't quite say go as far as complete business change consultants on the main, but they're getting there. And that's because, as we mentioned earlier, generative AI is starting to surface trends that they can then start to say, let's look at prioritizing where our efforts should be. Let's look at the interactions that lead themselves best to, high volume, probably low amount of value potentially that can be turned into automation. Around about 50% or so we see at the moment are those sort of interactions that lend themselves well to that. But as we go on further, we can start to see as those use cases are implemented, what comes next. And that's where we've launched AI Insights as a trial through our trusted partner program. So what we've enabled them to do is then turn that on free of charge for all the customers that we have. They can then unearth those insights and then go in, to your point, Finbarr, go in as that strategic level to say, here's what we've analyzed, here's our recommendations on how you should transform your business. These are the priorities from a customer experience perspective. And that's really resonating well. We are seeing a very high attach rate afterwards for either AI products that will help meet those use cases, or it could be a professional service engagement to fine tune and tweak areas within the platform, again, just to help it route through more efficiently. So we're definitely seeing partners are leaning in. That was point one. The other part is we're starting to see them have ancillary services that really enhance the offering. Again, they can unearth it from the insights that we're providing, but it could be something as simple as voice recognition. Are there third-party or tools within the Five9 suite that can be adjusted just to enhance the recognition? Could be postcodes, right? So again, we're starting to see partners really start to lean in either to having ancillary or even their own proprietary products that can enhance that Five9 offering.
I think that's really interesting when you're talking to partners, is that you've got the tool and then you've got a lot of bits that can be tuned by an expert who understands the tool to make sure that, I mean, you gave postcodes as an example. The one I always use is the Manchester accent. And I know because I was talking to a company that was selling into a GP's office in Manchester, and they said, well, the problem is we don't just have people from Manchester, we also have Scottish people coming down to try and book appointments as well. And the way that they talk about medical terms at this GP's office is completely different to understand. So there's lots of different ways that partners can wade into, the tools of the platform and wade in that kind of working with their customers to localize, to make these things work, which I think is really interesting.
Finbarr, I was really hoping you were going to use that as a segue just to do both a Manchester and a Scottish accent, but unfortunately, we managed to avoid you doing it. And Ty, I think it's really interesting what you were saying about, partners evolving into, advisory services. And one of the things that I don't think we can ignore this. I mean, we're talking about EMEA, but I think this applies globally. And Steve, you mentioned it already around agents trusting in any sort of scoring system. And you also mentioned the example with Lloyd's in a really compliant industry. So if we talk about trust in terms of artificial intelligence, so how important is that going to be in the decisions in terms of deployment and moving from that experimentation phase that we were talking about before to wider deployment? How do we, and it's one of the things we've found in our own research, both of consumers and agents, that generally there's optimism about AI, but there's also a huge amount of skepticism in terms of that. So Steve, how do you think you overcome some of those trust barriers around AI?
Yeah, I look at this. I think there's 4 pillars of trust in AI that I like to talk about. One is actually, let's start off with the customer. The customer, in a lot of cases, doesn't trust it because the use cases have been built for the supplier, not for the customer. Our own research showed us that especially consumers, they want to use artificial intelligence. They want to get things done quickly if it makes sense, but they want it on their terms. And so if you build, I say to companies, if you build for the customer, they will use it, and then your cost savings will flow through. If you start out with, we want to deflect X number of inquiries, then you're building for yourselves, and it's never going to work. So I think the customer has to trust, and so we need to design around them. We've already talked a little bit about the service reps, and that is, that's a really important. I don't think they're involved enough in some of the implementations that go on, and so there is therefore some level of skepticism. Your survey that you did last year elevated and highlighted some of the challenges that service reps are seeing, and of course, we can say, or a company can say, we've rolled out agent summarization. We are saving 20% on wrap up time or something, but that's only if everyone's using it. If everyone believes that it's working for them, it's something like, I think there's a statistic, 65% of service reps, especially tenured reps, don't believe the technology is going to help them. So if they're not using it, you've invested, you're paying for the software, but it's not actually delivering on the benefits that you thought it was going to be. So I think, there is that. And of course, the other element as well is, you get a customer who is stuck in bot jail. They eventually get out. They are now irate. They're now, the experience for the employee is awful because this customer's frustrated. They're taking out on the employee. The employee says, yes, that AI agent project went well, didn't it? Because, we're getting all the flack as a result of it. So that's a really, really important one, I think. And then the business, right? The business has got to trust AI. It's going to deliver on the results. Obviously, a lot of them in the regulated world, there's compliance and things. It would be wrong of us not to include the EU AI Act in this as well. There are implications there that we have to be sure of. So I think that they need to know it's going to execute with accuracy, and be reliable and so on. And most of all, they want observability. They want to see what's going on. It can't just be this black hole that everything goes into. They need to be able to look and see that's happening. And I think finally, obviously, the business has to trust their provider. Okay, that's us, and it's also our partners to make, they have to know that we're going to work with them. And, Ty was mentioning earlier, the issues around consultative support and turning up with a set of capabilities is really, really key. So, we can develop blueprints. We've got our blueprints. We have use cases, methodologies. They're all key to helping organizations build on that. But I think there's one other element as well that I want to bring up, and that is, when you do this, when you start looking at doing all this automation, there are lots of systems that are currently in place that a customer's going to say, we want to continue to use those. And so our approach, and also sometimes a customer say, well, actually, we're already using Cresta. So yeah, you've got your solution, but we want to use Cresta. We're not going to throw our toys out the pram and walk away, because the trust element here is, can we deliver a solution for the customer? So we believe we can build a lot more trust with our partners. Our partners often are delivering those other pieces of the pie. And so what we end up with is a solution for the customer. Of course, we'd like to sell everything we've got. Okay. But sometimes you have to recognize that the overall deal is a mix of integrated suppliers. And our role then is to make sure that all of those pieces work together.
And I think that's a really key point. And our research found in several regions that the sort of number one communication priority was integration between different systems. And definitely when it came to the contact center, we looked at the correlation between demand for integrated UC and CC. And actually, once businesses go above a certain size in terms of number of employees or number of agents in the contact center, actually they care much less about that because they want best of breed. And I think your point about in whatever other area that might be is a really key one. The integration piece is going to be vital.
Totally.
Well, and I think that's one of the things, in this conversation, when we talk about the role of partners in the ecosystem and things like that when you go and talk to a lot of the companies coming at this from the AI perspective, who don't have that CCaaS infrastructure, they're imagining this utopia where their AI solution is going to go in, it's going to fix a problem. And then the partners and the people working in the industry know that actually when you go to a certain size of company, that let me sell you a point solution that doesn't work with all of your other platforms just flops on its head, unfortunately, as a narrative, right? So you have to be thinking about this ecosystem building. And I guess that comes back around thinking about partners. I guess, Ty, the question would be, where are the strongest opportunities for partners to play in EMEA in this new landscape? And are there, I guess, a lot of people are going to be interested in different verticals, and whether there are specific sectors like public sector, maybe finance or retail, where really the pressure is higher to automate faster as they really do feel the burden of very high volumes of traffic and those kind of things.
You're definitely seeing a shift. I wouldn't call out specific verticals. We can talk through specific ones. There's not a growing trend in a set vertical, because to your point, there is a lot of automation available at each vertical that we're seeing. I think the main area though is more around the type of service that's being offered. So we've got the element of automation, but actually what we're also starting to see is when it's getting handed off to an agent, what is that experience? And that's the more common area. It's are we seeing, I mean, we announced at our earnings call the world of, humantic AI as a word, as a buzzword. And ultimately it is that area where we are starting, and our partners are really latching onto it, is where can we see automation, but where can we see a better customer experience and an agent experience when that handoff comes? And that is the point around, yes, we can integrate with third-party solutions, but if we've got all of that encompassing, are we able to take that data, identify an issue in the IVA that can then go straight through to the next best agent? And that's where we're seeing our IVA or AI agent solution mixing with AQM, agentic quality management, assessing all of those key traits on the agent side, the customer side, and then pushing it through. So a roundabout way that we wouldn't say there's certain industries or verticals that are really calling for it more than others. We've got the likes of Summit in the financial sector that are, sort of 50% containment rate. I think it was 23% improvement in abandonment rate. So we're seeing lots of different, we've got the same in public sector. We're seeing some really key wins across various different verticals at the moment. But the key thing is more around that similar story around what we're going to do for the customer and how we're going to improve that agent experience. And those are the key trends that we're starting to see at the moment.
And that agent experience piece is so important, because I think we've seen, and everyone will have seen, a lot of very aggressive forecasts of what potentially is going to happen to human agent numbers in the contact center globally. At Cavell, our forecasts are not that aggressive in terms of the decline of human agents, and that's because of the feedback that we have from industry partners. At the moment, we're just not seeing that drop off. We're seeing, Ty, you mentioned it there, agent augmentation technology. Steve, you mentioned it before in terms of better, quality management capabilities around the agent. So, Steve, if we look at the role of AI and the relationship between AI and human agents, how should businesses think about that relationship in terms of actually what are the benefits outside of just necessarily replacing staff with an automated, voice system? What are the other benefits that businesses should be thinking about?
Well, yeah, I was kind of hoping we're over the replacing service reps by now. We never believed it, right? I've never believed it. And I've been around this industry a very long time. Every 7 or 8 years, something new comes out that's going to close the customer service center. So, I don't wish to be an old hag about it, but this is a very, very important part of a company's value proposition. And so I think, it was sad to see that and the effect that had, but I think we're now moving into understanding a bit more. Let's be sort of blunt about this. If a company gets rid of, if they have no customer service other than automation, then they're going to fail. We've got to think about is that there's lots of scenarios where we're going to need people. Let's take one, which is a broken process. You can't keep a customer in the bot doesn't know what to do because the company hasn't solved the issue. You have to use a person to deal with that. You have to escalate to a human when the AI agent cannot answer that particular question. So this idea of, working together is absolutely critical. humans in the loop for, navigating any high stakes or regulated inquiries, high value. We've already seen where hallucinating agents have actually cost companies a lot of money, right? So we need the human in the loop for that. I think also, just driving the customer feedback. How do we do this better? Understanding what's going on with the responses customers are getting. How do we improve on that? And that's a human thing, right? The fine tuning, the redesign, that's all been done by humans. And that is one of those roles we can anticipate that people in the service center will take on, moving forward. And I think there's one other as well that maybe we should be thinking about, and that is, as consumers, we're all using ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude, or whatever to get answers of our suppliers, right? We're not going to look through the terms and conditions. We're just going to ask Claude. What if Claude's wrong? Because we're worried about that in providing services to our customers and in the front end. The customer thinks that maybe that Claude is right. And so you're now going to have this argument instilled between the customer and could try with an AI agent, but maybe move through to an employee. Getting that right, getting a win-win out of that is going to be a tough thing to do. So I think that's a new challenge that's going to be presented, increasingly.
So that data hygiene point, I think, is so important. And we have that from a Cavell perspective. When you have conflicting pieces of data on the, and I think, Steve, that perfectly, sort of harmonizes to your point. All you need is one or two conflicting customer data sources in the public domain, and consumers are going to get conflicting information from their own personal agents, and then what actually is the policy of the company providing the service. So I think that data hygiene and data cleanliness point is really important.
Yeah, and I mean, it also just echoes with this idea of, if someone is talking to automation and you don't invest that automation with enough power to be decisive, conclusive, the customer's going to think, well, if I escalate this, I might still have a chance. So there's a whole lot of learning on that front as well, in terms of the language the bot needs to use, the way that we need to approach this to make sure that these interactions happen in a natural way that leaves both parties kind of feeling like they've reached a good conclusion to a customer journey, even if it didn't go their way or they didn't get, the refund they wanted or something like that. So I think swinging this back around to sort of commercials and partners, I guess, Ty, why is this so attractive to the partner ecosystem? Why do we keep saying that AI is such a strong opportunity for them?
Simply put, I think it's opening up opportunities, not just immediate, but long-term part of that plan. So we're certainly seeing those that are, as I mentioned earlier, those that are ripe for automation. But also, as we've also discussed, there is a lot more to it from a partner perspective to show their value. So it is that element of going in. We mentioned it earlier. We once had a customer come through a partner to say, right, we're ready to do a booking system. Brilliant. So the partner went in, started to understand what was possible. They didn't actually have a booking system in the back end. They were doing it all through Excel. Right? So in order to get the data integrity, you need to start somewhere. So partners are able to recommend solutions that are adjacent to contact and customer experience, but will ultimately give that overall outcome that those customers are wanting. So I think what we're definitely seeing is areas that are immediate for ROI that can showcase that to say, here is the opportunity, but also those that are longer tail as well, that as we start to roll out the use cases that they're after, more will come. So we're definitely seeing partners that are seeing this from a stickiness perspective, not just in the short term, but because again, they can use things like AI insights to constantly go back, understand where they've managed to transform that business, where they can go next. It's starting to just come full circle. The other part that we're starting to see is Steve mentioned around our launch of agentic quality management. When we think around that sitting at that heart of the orchestration, that makes the proposition very sticky, because what it's starting to do then is making ultimately the customer journey through, if it's an AI agent, into that agent, really getting it to the right individual. So it's making it that it's getting better value for those customers, which ultimately is bringing more value for the partner. We also flipped our model. Patrick, going back to your question earlier, when we used to ultimately contract to licenses, we're changing that now. So yes, we're not really seeing a big decline in seat count. We're still growing on our seat count, but we are seeing some of that replaced with more AI spend. Not to certainly the levels that we've seen forecast elsewhere from others in the industry. We're still absolutely seeing that agents are being at the core and the heart of that customer experience. What we are seeing is the ability to flip that model to a revenue commit. So partners are really buying into that, because as we start to see, a few seat counts being removed here, we can then move that into automation. So again, from a stickiness perspective, we're allowing customers to take that channel of choice ultimately where they want to automate if they need to.
So from and Ty, I think I'll come back to you on that. So and Steve, I wanted to come to you on the sort of technology platform side from the 5.9 piece. But Ty, first of all, so you talked about sort of customer retention, but what else to 5.9 do to support partners through joint go-to-marketing efforts, channel growth? Finbarr mentioned earlier on, there's an education piece with partners, maybe taking these solutions to market. They might have been used to selling particular solutions. AI's new area. What do you do from the 5.9 perspective to support them on the go-to-market side?
Yeah, so we launched this year in recognition of that. So we've launched our new AI sales certification path. So to really allow their sellers that want to buy into the AI story to really become certified, so they understand how in which they can obviously proposition 5.9 in its true value to those opportunities. So we do that together. We're doing joint go to market. From marketing perspective. So we are really helping to surface key trends, which, Steve has a reel of that he can talk to, but ultimately making sure that we've got those use cases that resonate so that the partners are able to then leverage those for those opportunities to showcase where they can see real value. And then finally, we're ultimately bringing out new tools constantly. That's just constantly evolving. That's really helping to add to that overall wheelhouse. So we mentioned a few of those today. That's part of our Genius AI suite. More and more are coming, and it just helps to buy into that stickiness. So we've got Agent Assist Advanced that was launched a year or so ago. That's giving next best action to agents. Again, starting to help them to whether that means an upsell perspective, whether that means to what to say in a difficult situation. It's giving advice, and those are all starting to come out of the Genius AI suite to really help our partners and then our customers see value.
I mean that go-to-market support and channel support is obviously key. But Steve, obviously, if you don't have the product and the platform and ultimately the thought leadership piece, which 5.9 have been known for, leading and unicorn brand within the CCaaS market for ages. So can you talk a little bit about? And I know you talked about some of the features today from the platform side, how you've been supporting partners with innovation alongside some of the things you mentioned today.
I think a lot of it's, yes, it's supporting partners. I think it's also, we're thinking of the customer as well. What we're trying to do when you look at what the development is really make things more easy to deploy. So, that feeds through into our partners being able to take something to customers that is simple for them to demonstrate, to start get working on. That enables them to start focusing on the use cases more consultative approach. Here's some shiny technology. Now let's try and understand what you're actually trying to do. What are your priorities? Let us then look at how we can deliver on that. So yeah, I mean the platform is there. Obviously, the focus on being robust. In the company name 5.9, that is always going to be front and center of a key piece of any of this. These are front office services, and these reflect the brands of our customers. So I think, but we're still working on that. We're still making sure that's there. Increasingly working on diverse networking and things. Our voice network that spans the globe. Last year we added India as now the point of presence and things. So all of that continues to expand, and that helps partners because some of them have got customers. We're no use to them if they say, "I'm sorry, you can only serve my customer in 50% of the locations that." So we'll have to look for something else. So that's all important. So that continues to grow. Obviously, Europe is a growth area for us. And we know from Cavell's data, there's still lots of opportunity. As someone that is responsible for market intelligence, I'm always, making that very, very clear inside the business. So I think, simplicity is something that comes through as the products get launched, because ultimately, we'd like to take that cost of, that high cost of setup. We'd like to take that out. And that means that customers can get up and running faster with those offers, and they can start delivering their return on investment or their metrics for that much faster. And that's good for them. That's good for us as well, because ultimately they then go and buy more.
Brilliant. Kind of wrapping up on our questions, at least, we've talked about a lot of different changes and trends, but I guess if you both had to give one sort of final piece of advice before we sort of wrap up the podcast about what, one final piece of advice to partners, what do you think that would be? Maybe Ty, do you want to give a shot at that?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first and I'll pass to Steve. I think for me, my guidance is definitely look internally to identify where your strengths are, but also the gaps, and identify where you want to go. If you want to become that trusted advisor, how can you differentiate yourself from any other provider and partner that you may be going up against? And that's where we're starting to see the partners that are leaning in really make a difference in terms of making sure they've got the right skill set to deliver, to Steve's point, making sure they've got the right skill set to be able to consult and understand how they can really differentiate on that front. And then finally, whether that is third party services that they can bring in to overall differentiate against all the other partners that may be offering an off the shelf solution. And that's the ones where I'd start to say that's where we're starting to see the most differentiation and the most success happening at the moment.
I think from my side, I would say to partners that, there's an opportunity to broaden the audience. There's something like 9 to 11 stakeholders that are involved in making technology decisions. That's sort of the indication we have, especially in our space. And obviously with the advent of or adding more agentic capabilities and things, the trust issues increase. And so now we're increasing the number of people with responsibilities that have to sign off on those. But I would say that, there are really two most important ones. One is the IT leader, the person that effectively manages and often has the budget for the applications that are being deployed. And the other person is someone within the customer service domain. In my past, I spoke a lot with those people, and sometimes, they didn't know exactly why they were getting this new technology. They couldn't really see the benefit. They didn't understand what was being pushed to them. They have lots of issues and they want to have those resolved. So I think that there's opportunities for partners to look at their, how they build their communication plan, and start going into the different business units and understand what their priorities are. That's work that I'm doing with my colleagues in the go-to-market team in Sci59, looking at how can we understand more about the priorities of each of the different levels of leader. So starting the C-suite, going into business unit, and so on. And it's interesting. They are different. They don't all have the same priorities, but if you understand them all, then you can put together something. And ultimately, people still are going to buy from people, right? And it's all about the confidence, the trust. Do you trust this provider? Do they understand what we're trying to do? And can we work? Can we move forward with them? So we can talk a lot about technology. It is tough these days to differentiate on technology, because you can come to market with something, you can be first with something to market. You can see your competitors catch up with that pretty quickly. So I do think that how you go to market, how you build trust, and the communication plan within your stakeholders and each of those customers is a very key piece to being successful moving forward.
Well, thank you both, Ty and Steve, for joining us today. I mean, I thought this was a really interesting discussion. I mean, I think the thing for listeners to take away is that there are a lot of changes coming to the customer experience space, fueled by AI, and partners that are getting involved in these discussions. They're starting to think about how they're going to work on strategic consulting, how they're going to work on building their expertise with the technology, are going to be the ones leading ahead on that charge. within companies, within businesses, we see the contact center becoming a more strategic environment where we're taking data fueled by AI, fueled by more advanced analytics. And, we really need the channel to help customers understand not only what they can get from it, but also the art of the possible and how we turn all this insight and technology that we're seeing into real business outcomes. Of course, if you would like to learn more about Five9, you can reach out to us and we'll put you in touch, or you can go to the website, five9.com. I'm sure you'll find many ways to get in touch with either Steve or Ty if you have any more burning questions. Otherwise, that is it from all of us. Another episode of Cloud Conversations over. Thanks for listening. And obviously, it's goodbye from Cavell until next time.